States Space Force, but not yet a full-blown Department of Space. The U.S. Space Force idea has been around for decades in both science fiction and in the minds of people who attempt to seriously consider what our nation needs in order to deter future wars, and if necessary, to fight and win them. In early 2001, before the 9/11 attack, it seemed as if Donald Rumsfeld was ready to propose something very like the Space Corps idea, a new service inside the Air Force comparable to the way the Marines are part of the Navy Department. As one USAF space officer put it, "Finally, we have someone in the SecDef's office who loves us." After the attack, Rumsfeld had other and more urgent work to do. While many people in the defense establishment still spoke in terms of transformation, the major reforms that had been expected never happened. A typical example of this sort of thing was the failed attempt to build a transformational satellite communication system. But the Space Force idea refused to die. The post-9/11 global war on terror required massive communications capability. Satellites that were used to control drones over Afghanistan from bases in Nevada were soon overwhelmed. And while the Air Force and its contractors found some ingenious ways to work around the limitations of existing systems, it was obvious that new ways of doing business were required. Yet Congress did not want to create an extra four-star position devoted to Homeland Defense. This seems to have forced Rumsfeld and the Bush administration to disestablish U.S. Space Command and place its functions under U.S. Strategic Command in order to allow for the creation of Northern Command, whose job is Homeland Security. Over time, for military space operations, this proved even less satisfactory than what had existed before. Strategic Command, whose primary emphasis is nuclear deterrence, failed to give the space mission the support it needed. Indeed, over the years, the Omaha-based organization has proved less than adequate at most of its functions, but that is probably due more to failures of the political leadership in Washington than to anything else. Under the U.S. Constitution, the interplay between the President as Commander-in-Chief, the Congress with its power of the purse, and the military is inherently difficult. All democracies have this problem to one extent or another, but in America we often make things harder on the military than even a strict interpretation of our founding document would require. One way we do this is by electing some truly stupid people to Congress. One prominent New York congresswoman is supposed to have replied to some constituents who were urging her to support a human trip to Mars with the words, "Haven't we been there already?" In any case, neither George W. Bush nor Barack Obama were willing to take the time and make the effort to think about what an effective U.S. space policy would look like. It was left to a small band of congressmen and senators to try and elaborate what reforms were needed. On the Senate side, John Kill, Republican from Arizona, while he was in office, did the heavy lifting. But in the end it was Mike Rogers, Republican from Alabama, and his partner Jim Cooper, Democrat from Tennessee, who provided the decisive leadership. In 2017, they introduced a bill that would have created a Space Corps inside the Department of the Air Force, supposedly an analog to the way the Marine Corps is part of the Department of the Navy. The proposal was opposed by the powers that be inside the Defense Department, but inside what can be referred to as the military space community, the reaction was, "At last." Rogers's bill easily passed in the House with bipartisan support. Sources indicate that Rogers cut a deal with Senator John McCain to support McCain's desire for a new cyber command, independent of the National Security Agency, in exchange for Senate support for the Space Corps. In any case, according to sources, Senator McCain reneged on his promise. It may be that he cut some sort of deal with Air Force leadership, or maybe he was just being his usual obstreperous self. In any case, it looked as if the Space Corps idea was dead, and no one was counting on President Donald Trump to act decisively. Aside from his promise, fulfilled, to reestablish the White House Space Council under Vice President Mike Pence, many specialized observers believed that he had even less interest in space than his predecessors. We were wrong. One can guess that space exploration and U.S. military superiority in space are integral to what Trump sees as American greatness. In this, he is not alone. For many baby boomers, the moon landing in 1969 redeemed an America which looked, on TV anyway, as if it were coming apart. Meanwhile, Star Trek, with its quintessentially American optimistic vision of the future, and the first Star Wars movie, whose audiences refused to get the subtext that it was the U.S. that was the evil empire, not Leonid Brezhnev's USSR, just added to the mystique of space. Perhaps they